Welcome to Lifing Coast to Coast, the podcast where we explore trending topics in personal development, wellness, and the art of lifing in today's ever-changing world. I'm moderator Mickey here, along with the co-hostesses with the mostesses, Dr. Lovey and Heidi. Let's get into it. Welcome back. We were talking about people-pleasing and fictional case studies from a coaching lens, seeing what people-pleasing really looks like. It can be a deeply ingrained survival strategy. It's rooted in fear, shame, or unworthiness and keeps us small, resentful, disconnected from our true selves. It can look like seeking acceptance and validation from outside yourself, avoiding conflict or arguments at all cost, dimming your light, saying sorry constantly, even for small or unnecessary things, and abandoning your core values to keep the peace or gain approval. And so we're going to continue with our final 3 case studies. So let's get into it.
All right, let's get into it.
We are taking some fictional case studies and turning it into some coaching ideas and practices. We're going to talk about Maya. Maya often says things like, if I don't stay ahead, I'll fall behind. And then what was all of this for? Raised with the belief that she had to be twice as good to get half as far. Maya only ever received praise for achievements, not for who she was. Her excellence became her armor. She was often the only woman of color in the room, high-achieving yet lonely, driven yet depleted. She feared that if she ever stopped pushing herself, she would become invisible. And in coaching, Maya begins to explore how her drive to overperform was shaped by survival, legacy, and love. She spent a lifetime managing others' expectations, bosses, peers, family, without pausing to ask what she truly wanted for herself.
Yeah, this is good because right before we started talking, we were talking about masks, and there are certain groups of people who feel like they have to put on a different persona in certain environments. We've experienced that in leadership roles where you're the only woman there, or if you are a person of color, if there's that cultural piece, you have to do twice as good. And then there's this piece with if they're going to think I'm a bitch for women. A lot of times we don't want to come off as a bitch. If this is a Black woman, I don't want to be labeled as the angry Black woman. There's a lot of layers to this case. This is a fictional case, but I can think of different situations where in my own life and when I've worked with people that this person could be very real.
And this starts really young. And I have clients in this particular situation and unraveling all the way back to that
childhood.
Yeah, that piece so that they can recognize that the excellence is who you are, not what you do. You know, that piece of it, letting them understand you were always excellent. It isn't the achievement. That's what you were made to believe. Mm-hmm. And that's the thought in your head all the time. Must keep running, must keep running, must keep running. And never let them see you sweat either. Yeah. And in this particular case that you created, I'm really curious because that I'm only worthy if I'm exceptional seems to be really relevant today for women in particular. And my thought goes to women in corporate culture who are at odds with one another because it's a dog-eat-dog situation. I have a couple clients who, the women are vicious. You got to watch your back and talk about wearing a mask.
What is that about? I see that a lot in minority populations. And when I say minority, I'm not talking about numbers. I'm talking about the group of people who aren't in the power position.
Right.
So I see that with minority populations where a person from that group who was treated a certain way excels, but then they treat people within their own group the way that they don't want to be treated by the outside group. I guess a lot of that happens in corporate world.
Oh, yeah.
Academia too.
Yeah, it's like a contagion, right? And it's like you get chewed out by your boss, you're in charge of a team, you've let the level up, down, whatever, and you turn right around, and instead of gathering your team and saying, hey, we need to come together and really figure this out, but we can do this. They're like, you did this and you did this and you did this. And this is a little bit off topic. It came up because it's a thing.
You think that it would cause a bond? I see this in zombie movies or apocalyptic movies all the time, right? I do, because I'm like, they should be fighting against the zombies. Why are they fighting against each other? But it's because they do that in real life. And whoever's creating this sci-fi thing is using real life situations
As the model.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Such a trip.
All right. So with Maya, core wound, I'm only good enough if I'm exceptional.
Right.
Core wound. Okay.
Let me say this.
Yeah.
This is not a real person. However, I have worked with women who are in leadership roles who were exceptional at everything and were so hard on themselves.
Yeah.
They beat themselves up so bad. And I don't know if people would have labeled them as people pleasers, people in their life. However, I would say that they were people pleasers from my perspective and seeing how they operated.
Yeah. And it's sort of this level up of having to keep up this exceptional, high achieving standard. It is one thing to be a people pleaser on the other cases that we've talked about here. That's one level. But if you can imagine what energy it takes and how intense every minute of every day would be, how is it even sustainable? It's not sustainable. We know that. But to have done that for so long and to have put yourself in a position to be your own worst enemy because you are literally driving yourself into the ground.
Where would your entry point be with a client like this?
It would first of all be, aren't you tired? Aren't you tired of running so fast? And what is enough achievement? When will this be enough, or is there an enough? Have you ever thought about that? And then the most important question, or I would go in with, would be, what does this give you?
Where's the balance between having goals and striving versus pushing yourself beyond and having to be exceptional? How would you know where that line is? I'm putting this on me, and I'm thinking about how dealing with imposter syndrome and feeling like I'm never going to be good enough. They're going to know that I don't belong here. I don't know what they think I know. And feeling not smart enough, continuing to get degrees and certifications and things like that. Those things are great and they're good goals to have, but they don't fulfill me in the way that I was looking for them to do. And they don't validate my worth and validate what I know and what I don't know. Because you can have a license and not know shit about anything. Sure. Right. You can not have a license and be an expert in an area.
You're talking about me?
It's really about other people's expectations, right? I really liked what it said there of like how you manage other people's expectations of what you should be doing rather than your own.
Yeah.
And I relate a lot to the imposter syndrome of like how just keep going and go to the next level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about a few women I've worked with who were in leadership positions, and it didn't just start there. Through childhood, they were the one who placed number one in the relay race. They only did what they could excel in. And they did not get any attention from their parents except when they got the blue ribbon, and it was expected. They came home with A minuses, they would get in trouble.
Right. So how does this relate to people pleasing? This is sort of a different echelon, right? Of it. It's like the hyperachiever, is really probably trying to please the parents. Like it goes all the way back to that big old good, not good enough woman, unless you are first chair violin, unless you are, the valedictorian, unless you are, wow. So now the context of highly successful, highly driven people are just highly intense people pleasers, really.
I agree. And like I had said earlier, I don't think that people would think of some of the people that are in those positions as people pleasers, but they really are.
Right.
And that's like their
like that
thing. They are hyper achievers.
Yeah.
Right.
So the correlation, this is a great case study because the correlation is like the penny drop for me. It's, oh my gosh, this is what this is. It's another level of the same codependence. Codependency comes into the umbrella of this, but it is that thing.
Absolutely. And we have another case where this person was more from a family that's shame-based, and you represent us. However, even though we're not talking about that case right now, I'm thinking that culturally, that whole you represent your people and you have to present a certain way that adds another people-pleasing layer.
I think, for sure.
Yeah. You've got to make us all look good or you're going to make us all look bad. Yeah, that's interesting. So in this case, what would your approach be for Maya?
Where would you go?
Yeah. Well, I would definitely do mirror work and some of the reparenting stuff. What were the messages that you didn't get that you needed to hear? And getting to that core wound and having Maya give herself those messages. And I think the most important message to all of these cases is I'm loving, I'm lovable, I am worthy, whether I'm doing or not. It's not what I do, it's who I am that makes me worthy. Right. So I think that would be a big piece. And when I think about people who I've worked with, similar to Maya, there wasn't a lot of emotional expression.
Makes sense.
They intellectualized everything and would stay in their head. And it would seem like they would talk about some really deep stuff, but it was almost like a script.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't any emotion that was expressed with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Wow.
How would you approach this?
One of my favorite coaching questions. If you could wake up tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. That's the magic question, right?
Be or do anything, what would that be? And I always say, you don't have to answer right now. I want you to think about it. Think about that. And I would probably use a treadmill metaphor. How long are you going to run on that treadmill till you break the band? A lot of things like that, because that person wants to stop the world and get off. They do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking in my practice, if I'm working with somebody like this, I ask a similar question. If you woke up tomorrow and something magical happened overnight or whatever, and you woke up and you lived this ideal, perfect world, what would that look like? What would be different than now? Yeah. Even if it's unrealistic, name it. Yeah. And would somebody like Maya be able to let that guard down and say, I just want to rest. I want to be able to cry and still be looked at as being the boss or whatever.
Don't we all? You're allowed to cry. We're allowed to cry.
Yeah.
Still be the boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's a good one.
All right. We're going to do another one. Ready?
Yeah.
All right. This is amazing. This is amazing. All right. Here's Nicole.
Okay.
Nicole admits, I can't let them see me sweat. If I show anger or sadness, I become a threat, not a person. Growing up, she heard messages like, good girls smile, ugly girls get angry. You represent our family. This is the one. Don't give them a reason to judge. To survive, she learned to swallow her emotions and wear a mask of composure. So in coaching, Nicole begins to reconnect with the emotional landscape she had buried. She journals about moments when she needed comfort, but received pressure instead. Her suppressed anger begins to surface not as rage, but as grief. She begins to name her needs for the first time.
I wrote here the core wound is if I show emotion, I'll be dismissed or punished. But that's not the core wound. That is part of it. What do you think?
It's just always not good enough when it's this kind of thing. It's just not good enough. I'm not enough the way that I am.
Yeah, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
About not being able to show emotion, not being authentic.
And having these rules about what it means to be a good girl.
Another role, right?
See?
There's another pattern.
Yeah.
Good girls smile. I actually was told that I was ugly. I was allowed to get angry in my family when I was sad, if I got sad. But
Interesting.
yeah.
Angry was not, but
No,
sad was.
I was allowed to be angry, but sadness.
Sad.
Yeah. My mom she had a really big accent. She said, look at the 2-kilo-pound lip. But she was trying to say I was pouting.
Right.
And she would say that my lips were 2-pound kilos. So I didn't let myself be sad in front of people. I still am that way a lot of times, but I allow myself to be angry.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's talk. Let's go.
Talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about it.
And I know that it's a strength to be able to cry.
It's interesting thinking about repressed emotions when it comes to people pleasing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're being denied the right to feel. And that is really basic. We are feeling beings. It's what makes us human, really, is our range of feelings. So as a young child to be denied that, it's a right. It's really deep when you think about it on that level. And we of a certain generation, I'll give you something to cry about.
Oh, yeah.
Go to your room and come back out when you're happy. All that stuff. We've heard all of that. And yet when you think about it, holding in anger, holding in sadness, we all know this now. It lives in our body. It causes dis-ease, distress. It is physically harmful.
It is.
Because it's not just our mind. It's the whole mind-body connection. All right. In this case, all right, she's been taught to hide all the emotions.
Yes.
She's been denied her right to feel completely.
Yes.
Where do you go first with this?
I worked with some people like this before, and this really is not suppressed. I know it says here it's written suppressed, but this is repressed because some of the people that I've worked with have told me I don't get angry. I'm a happy-go-lucky person. I don't get angry.
Yeah.
And that's a hard spot for me because I'm like, well, where does it go then? Because there's stuff that's probably there that you're not even aware of.
Yeah.
Where suppression would be you're aware of it and you push it down.
Right. Right. And with this one, speaking of coaching tools, this is where I bring in my very favorite tool, which you gave to me, which is the anger iceberg. When people tell me I don't get angry, I'm like, I get that. Check this out. And then look below the line. What? Oh, yeah, frustrated.
It's a picture of the iceberg. And for everyone who's listening and they haven't seen it, there's all this stuff underneath.
Yeah. And just
hurt, rejected.
Yeah. And almost always anger is a secondary emotion. There is something below it, or many things. It can be a composite of many things. And anxious lives under there, actually. It's surprising how many things live under there. Grief and sadness.
Oh, so you asked about this case. I'd probably tap into the grief.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then, because if they are denying the anger, how about grief? Oh, yeah. Go right there.
The loss of being able to show emotions.
Yeah.
Having that full spectrum of being a whole person emotionally.
Yeah.
That's a loss.
Yeah.
The whole mask thing is curious to me. swallowing emotions, wearing a mask,
Being strong and
it's miscongeniality is who I pictured.
Interesting.
Like this person who always looks perfect, this person who always acts proper.
This question came into my head. Do you cry inside?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
wow, I got chills.
Because, my goodness, children need to cry.
They do.
For those of you who don't know, when we cry, we actually release stress hormones through our tears. So when you think of a child being denied that, where does all that stress go? Into the body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is an interesting one, too. These are really good.
I wrote down some questions that I thought about, and you pretty much covered it by that one, right? What emotions have you been taught to hide? But what you asked was perfect.
Yeah, I bet. That one's just...
Do you cry?
I would probably do somatic work too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you feel this?
Right.
Yeah.
If that part of your body could speak to you, what would it say? Movement. Act out how you feel.
Yeah.
That's great. I love movement. All right. Last case study we have is Diego. Diego shares that I've always known how to be who people needed me to be. It kept me from being hurt. As a child, he was teased for his voice and his mannerisms. When he turned to his family, he was met with comments like, "We love you, but do you always have to be so feminine?" He learned to shapeshift for approval, molding himself to avoid rejection. In coaching, Diego uncovers how his people-pleasing was once a brilliant survival strategy, but one that now blocks him from real intimacy and joy.
Would it be okay if I ask you as a newer coach how you would approach this case? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I think it's really interesting with talking about people pleasing being used as a survival strategy, as a survival tactic to stay safe in this case. And I think it's a good example of how people pleasing isn't always like bad at
Right.
first.
Right.
I can see that Diego didn't feel safe. And maybe the elements of the past are no longer present. Maybe now he's in a more safer space where he can fully be himself. So I think that I would probably start with asking what's going on now when it comes to how he's feeling about himself, his mannerisms, his voice. Yeah, I think that this is definitely an inside job, is where you would start for me.
This was based on a case that I work with, and it was somebody who came out to their family as being gay, and this person happened to be what us in our society would label as feminine. We know that's a social construct. And the family was very loving and accepting. They had no problem with him being gay, but they didn't want everybody else to know.
Yeah.
They were a church family.
Oh, wow.
And that was a big thing with them. They were like, do you have to act so gay?
Gay, yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that they would say to him.
And so he was, in essence, being asked to deny his very essence, the way you talk, the way you walk. And I know there are people in society that believe that is put on and whatever. And this goes along with that thinking. So he's acting gay or he's being feminine on purpose or whatever that is. But this child was talking about mixed messages.
Mhm.
We love you the way that you are. Just be different when you leave the house.
Yeah.
Oy,
Yeah.
that is
It
hard.
just sounds like he wasn't free to be him. And I would want to explore like what freedom is, what it could be for him,
Yeah.
and not someone else's expectations again.
There was a lot of affirmations work and building community. That was a really big movement forward for him because there was such a deep loneliness. And he actually said to me, I can be at a family function and it's hundreds of people and I'm standing there and I'm so lonely. I'm so lonely.
You know what that just brought up for me? Going back when people were just coming out and children were being excommunicated from their families and their churches. And we don't want you, we don't want you, we don't want you. And of course, you think that's the unkindest cut of all. But what was born out of that was they created their own families, their own communities, where they were accepted, enveloped, and loved for who they were, exactly the way that they were. And those families gave them what they needed. But in this case, to be in the family, pretending that they loved you the way that you are, but then putting all of these restrictions on your behaviors, it makes perfect sense that he would stand among this entire group of people to whom he was related and supposedly loved by, but feel absolutely, totally alone. Wow.
Yeah. And it was so cool to see the connections in the community that was built. And the other thing with him was the self-deprecation in jokes. He was always putting himself down in some kind of way, and it became a joke. And he was doing that before anybody else could say something because it didn't hurt him if he said it, that type of thing. So there was a lot of that. And we had to do a lot of work on reframing how you talk to yourself.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
The chosen family is a great point of what do you have now?
Yeah.
That works for you. That can make you feel more comfortable.
Yeah. And as that person's coach, I would encourage them to go out and find your people because your biological family is not necessarily your logical family.
Yep. And that's what we did.
Good.
That's what we did. And with that happening, then he was able to, because he loved his family. Family was one of his top values. With building this other community, though, he was able to go back into his family environment and set boundaries.
Nice.
We're not supposed to be invested in outcomes as coaches, but it was so cool to see this growth.
It's not that we're not allowed to be happy for an outcome.
For sure.
We're not allowed to try to direct an outcome. That investment.
And just like for our own well-being, we have to be really careful not to get involved in the outcome, whatever they choose. We can be pulling for them, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Not to be all torn up. I can't believe that this happened.
Yeah, no.
That's what I mean by invested in it.
Right. Yeah. But to be able to celebrate the victory of him finding community outside of his family, going back to the family and placing those boundaries there so he could protect himself from what he had been subjected to that was unhealthy. That's a win. I would, as a coach, it's not an investment, it's a joyful outcome.
I would like to ask you both a closing question. Bring all of these amazing, incredible insights about people pleasing. In your words, what do you think is choosing yourself and then also still being an agreeable person? What does that look like?
For me, and being an agreeable person is not what I would encourage anybody to do. Okay. People are either innately kind or aloof or whatever they are, right? So what are you? You know, that's the question I would ask. Well, I'm tender-hearted and I care about people and those kinds of things, right? So how do you embody that? How do you embrace that? How do you do that and yet not allow people to take advantage of you, not take on things that you don't want to do? How do you learn that no is a complete sentence, right? And that's where we go back to clear as kind, right? Hey, would you help me clean out my garage? No, I won't. I'm busy. And that's hard for people pleasers to say. It really is. But it doesn't make you unkind. It really doesn't. It doesn't. And boundary setting makes people feel like they're being unkind. The truth of the matter is they're being good to themselves and they're being clear with the other person. I have plans on Saturday. And P.S. don't say, oh, I am so sorry. I can't help you. Don't do that. You don't need to do that. You don't.
Does it feel like what Heidi's saying is easier said than done?
A little bit.
Yeah.
But
No,
it's practice. I think
does.
the boundaries is a huge point.
It does help to start with strangers where there's not a high risk in the relationship being hurt in some kind of way. Starting with strangers. And I know I always go back to values, knowing and being really clear about what is important to you, what's negotiable here and what's not.
Yeah.
And it's okay to think that something is flexible and then renegotiate and say no.
Yeah.
Even though I used to let you walk in the house without knocking on the door,
Right.
I don't feel comfortable about that anymore. Just something simple like that. Like you can renegotiate.
Right.
The knowing what you are tolerating and what you enjoy. I think that's really big.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to me looking at all these cases. Is there any commonality here? And do you have that or no? Did I put that on the paper?
Yeah. Unlearning survival-based identities, reclaiming your voice, your emotion, your rest, reconnecting with the core self and not the role that you played, practicing worthiness without performance, perfection, or self-abandonment, and learning to give and relate without hidden expectations.
Because I was seeing, are these really people pleasers? I was questioning the cases.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only one that didn't stand out as the shining example of people pleasing for me was the exceptional achiever one, that one. And that's when that penny dropped for me. I was like, oh my God, this is people pleasing on a really high level. Yeah. But yeah, people pleasing is probably, I don't know, 50% of the people I work with. One of the things that we're working on. Yeah. It's big.
Yeah.
And it's not all women, by the way. I want to make that distinction.
Well, we had 2 guys.
Yeah. But people do tend to generalize over there. And, you know, for any of the men listening, we're glad that we had these case studies as well, because it's both ways.
This was a wonderful conversation. You were both so wise. Thank you all for listening, for watching, for tuning in. Please make sure you are liking and subscribing and commenting, and please share the podcast if you found value in it. And if you're interested in seeing what we've been up to, check out liking.services and find us in the liking community.
Thank you.
Bye.
Until next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Lifing Coast to Coast. Join us every Saturday for insightful, relatable, and lively discussions that empower and inspire.